We've all been there. Something you didn't plan for. It's your health, your spouse, your job, something that now stands in the way. As Mike Tyson reminds us, everyone has a plan till they get punched in the face. Anyone can make a plan, but very few can execute when the pressure's on. Well, imagine having a way to handle things that get in the way, even turn the obstacle into an opportunity. Welcome to A Call to Rise. I'm your host, Joel Landy, founder, entrepreneur, former naval officer, and this is where we help you build resilience, which is the ability to manage high levels of challenge and disruption while maintaining high levels of effectiveness and well-being. Because goals without setbacks are uncommon, and big plans without resilience are just not happening. So if your job or life demands staying and playing at a high level, you're exactly where you need to be. So let's jump in. Last week, we talked about the importance of vision. Vision is where we want to land in life. It's a preferable future, and we get to define it if we're fortunate for ourselves. But today, I want to talk specifically to you about how to get there. And it's called a mission, right? The mission is what drives you when motivation fades. And, I see it all too often right now today. Too many young men, especially young men, but men, are drifting, right? And living lives that are comfortable but completely meaningless at times because it lacks a central objective. And that objective, I believe, I'm going to call it a mission, right? And today we're going to define what a mission actually is, why you're dangerous without one, and how to find the work that finally makes you come alive again, right? So good stuff, right? A mission is bigger than money. Until we find a mission, life can feel like a race to the top, like it's an ongoing competition, like survival of the fittest. But men on a mission are making a difference, and they understand the mission is bigger than themselves, right? That's what keeps them fired up. And I know it sounds lofty, it sounds heroic, and we'll talk about that a little bit further in the podcast, but it's within reach. For me, my mission is to help others reach their potential. And I'm going to unpack that further along the way and provide mindset and methods and tools in order to help people get there. But, I want to switch gears and talk about the unfortunate reality of today. And, I'm going to shed a lot of sunshine on this, but I think you got to bear with me, and I think you'll agree that, today men are carrying burdens. They're living lives, as a close friend always reminds me, in quiet desperation. And it's true. Because it's easier to check out, right? It's easier to seek pleasure, and it's easier to do things to avoid or even numb the pain. And there's a lot of messages out there. There's a lot of mixed messages, and it's becoming easier for young men to distrust the institutions that are shaping their world. And it's interesting too, as a performance coach, and I've got the privilege of coaching one very large sales organization in North America. I coach their sales organization, primarily their regional sales managers. And at some point, after we talk about hitting our revenue targets, we talk about personal matters. And invariably, it pivots to talking about not their daughter, but their son. And I'll hear things like, he's lethargic, he's unmotivated, he's stuck, he's on a gaming console. And, this is not what they say, but this is what I think when they start to tell me this, because I've heard this from many, many parents. He's missing an opportunity to find what he's really looking for. And what he's really looking for is a place to make a difference. He's looking for a place where his life matters. He's not looking for fun, believe it or not. I know you're shaking your head. You're like, oh, no, you don't know my younger brother. You don't know my nephew, my cousin. But he's not looking for fun. He's looking for a sense of direction. And I'm going to go as far as to say he's looking for his mission. Because I believe every man is designed for some type of intentional work. It's not coincidental, and it's not accidental. It's something that he is forged and formed to do. And, that's why when you watch movies and you think of movies, Full Metal Jacket, Black Hawk Down, Saving Private Ryan, they hit men so deeply. And it's because men, when they watch that, they crave and yearn for that mission. It's not the blood and the guts. It's really the sense of purpose. It's the idea of good overcoming evil. And that really speaks to the heart of, I think, every man. And with that mission, there's always it's guided by a sense of rules or a code, which I think is even a better word. In the military, a code is a deeply internalized way of thinking, which is what they systematically build in you when you actually come to them. But it becomes a standard that governs action under pressure in the middle of chaos. It helps people overcome fear in the most dire situations. But that's really what a mission does, and that's what a code does. It really gives shape to the way people think and act, and it directs their steps. And that is one of the things today that I think is really hurting men, and especially young men. But for today's conversation, mission's not about conquest or dominance. It's about connection. It's about a connection in order to make a contribution, and it's about giving the best part of yourself to others. But before you can do that, before you can give yourself and give back, you got to make peace with yourself. And in one of the upcoming episodes, I'm going to talk about battle tested. And I'm going to talk about the opportunity that every man gets at some point in life to look back on his life and take an inventory of what he's done or not done, and what he's attributed to others, and to take ownership of that particular exercise, and to turn that narrative into a springboard of good. And we're going to talk about that in the upcoming podcast entitled Battle Tested. I think it's really something that's really cool. But, and there's a lot of ways forward. And obviously today is about a mission. A mission is a way about getting direction. A mission is about pursuing things that are purposeful. And I know that there are a lot of things that are out there. There are a lot of things I've yet to discover. I don't want to sound like this is the way, but it is one way. One way to do better in life, to live a rewarding life, to live a purposeful life, is to believe that you have a mission, that you are a man on a mission. And so let's unpack this together. A couple of thoughts before we go into 3 ideas that you can take action on. This podcast is designed for you to frame your personal mission statement, right? This is the beginning of the work. Maybe you're just starting out. Maybe you just started out in a new career. Maybe you're midlife. Maybe you're kind of toward the end of your useful years and you're now looking to figure out, how do I give back? How do I give back after I've had all this success? And maybe you feel like you're in neutral. Maybe you feel like you're coasting. Maybe your motivation's gone down. So today's podcast is really for everybody. But I really want to talk about the idea that when you're on a mission, number one, mission changes your perspective. And I want you to think about this for a second. I'm going to give 2 examples. One is a real estate agent. We all know that real estate agents exist they buy and sell homes on our behalf. They do it because they want to help people. They want to make tons of money, and that's great. I completely support that idea. But imagine a real estate agent that had a little bit different of a motivation, or maybe felt that they were on a mission. Imagine if that same real estate, on their way to making great money, said, my role, my mission in life is to guide people through one of the most emotional and financially significant decisions that they'll ever make. And I get to do that with clarity and confidence because I really know my craft, right? That's a deeper motivation. That's a mission, right? That's an idea that something special is happening within this person's life. And because of that, they live by a code. And they're guided by a different set of ideas that keeps them motivated when sales and life is not going the way that they want to go. And it's also similar for any other type of leadership role. I mentioned earlier that I coach small sales teams. And, when you're coaching small sales teams, it's about selling, it's about performance metrics, and it's about revenue outcomes. And we know that, right? And that's why they exist, and that's fantastic. And I get the joy of coaching a very large sales organization. And my primary job is to help sales leaders inspire sales consultants so that they sell. Now, here's the cool thing, though. Another thing that I do within that same large company is I help them take another step further and look a little bit deeper and try to discover, is there something more meaningful about what they do that could sustain them in the down times, right? So imagine a salesperson or sales leader that's driving performance metrics and motivating people to sell and hit revenue targets. But imagine that same person who is not just doing that, but developing others so that they reach their potential while delivering results that manage. Imagine that person saying, I am in a leadership role that shapes character. I am in a leadership role that protects human capital, and I'm building future leaders Monday through Friday. And yes, we're selling, but that's what I'm doing as a leader. That's what happens when you have a mission. Mission changes your perspective. You tap into something more meaningful, more deep. It sustains you in lulls, but it gives you that code, that set of ideas that directs behavior. And in this sense, you move from just driving income to driving impact, right? And so I'll ask you a question at this point. If you don't have a mission, what are you building your life around? And what are you driving toward? Because all of us right now are living out a cultural blueprint that we've inherited. And I mentioned it up above. The blueprint sounds something like go to school, get out of school. If you don't go into a technical role, go to college, get a college degree, be competitive, find a job, maybe get married, maybe have kids, but find a career and have a trajectory where you get to work hard to promote so that you can do and have all the things that you want in life. That's a cultural blueprint. And I'm going to poke holes in that later in the podcast because there's some really, really critical things missing from that. And that's why there are a lot of really unhappy and unmotivated and burnt out people in corporate America today because they lack the very thing that this podcast is putting forward. It's the idea that you can have a mission within your professional life, or you can have a mission in your life, period. But the first idea is that if you get a mission, it's going to change your perspective. It's going to motivate you far more deeply. Secondly, if you get a mission, your mission will be anchored in service to others. And so, because it's important to be reminded that a mission that only serves you won't sustain you. And we see it all the time. I know a lot of people that are very wealthy, that drive very nice cars, that go to very nice places for vacation. But I also know that those types of people at times can be very discouraged, often even depressed. And it's not because they don't have the means to do whatever they want, but they don't deep down feel rewarded by the contribution they make in the world. And for some of you starting out, you might think like, oh, yeah, sure. Well, I'd be different. If I were making $500,000, I'd be that guy that somehow, or 750, whatever, I'd be that guy that would be able to figure it out. Well, here's the thing that you're going to learn, and take it from a man with gray hair. The people that are ahead of you that experience 30, 40 years of life are going to tell you a lot of truths. And I'm here to tell you that you making a lot of money is not the answer. Now, I wish you all the best. If that happens to you, I'd support you in that. I don't think that's a bad thing at all. But you got to give back. You got to give back in a very coherent and very sustained way. And, I think part of this, and the world is changing, and some of it's for good. And I'm not going to go through all the generational differences and distinctions with Y, Z, X, and millennials, but I mentioned it earlier, right? There's a blueprint out there that's been inherited. And if you're a young man, I want to talk to you because I think this is a confusing time for you. And I'm going to get on my soapbox. I'm going to preach a little bit. Forgive me. Turn the volume down if you don't want to hear this, and that's fine. You can skip over this in the next 2 minutes. But I think young men are getting confused, right? And so I'm going to say this right now. The goal in life is not for you to be happy. And the goal in your life is not to accept everybody. And I'm going to put a asterisk on that. That does not mean that you disrespect people that think differently. That does not mean that you look down on them. That does not mean that you're arrogant, and that does not mean you marginalize them. But the blueprint that right now you are drinking from social media sources is that you should be happy and you should be accepting. The problem with this is that it replaces the concept of virtue. Now, before you roll your eyes, let's just simplify the word virtue, because this is thousands of years old that's been stood the test of time. Virtue is the idea that there is an ideal that mankind can achieve that is very strong and is tested over time. It's enduring, it feels right, it looks right, it is right. And often it requires sacrifice and discipline. Now, the problem with the culture, the blueprint that you're receiving is that you're being asked to be nice and accepting, which cultivates a culture of conflict avoidance. And when a young man or woman whose primary goal is just to feel good, you lose the capacity to endure any kind of meaningful suffering, which is required for you to achieve some form of goodness or even greatness. Now, in my language, when you live a life like that, you're not resilient, you're fragile. And so when you are called to something big, you're not prepared, and it's difficult to rise. But that's why we're having today's conversation, Today's conversation is pointing you in direction of resiliency, and being a man or a woman on a mission is absolutely going to build a resilient character in you. And that's what we do. Quick shout out to A Call to Rise. We're equipping you with mental toughness and emotional strength that you need to navigate uncertainty, to bring certainty in an uncertain world, overcome the setbacks that you're going to face, but to really thrive in a rapidly changing world. And so I'm going to ask you again, what's your mission? And if you don't have one, what are you building your life around? And what standard are you measuring your decisions against? And what is really pulling you forward? Especially what's pulling you through things when things get hard. And I know you're scratching your head, and I hope the wheels are turning because some of us have never done this. Now, some of us have an idea, and maybe you can articulate that. And if you do, have you ever formalized it? Have you been able to put it into one or two clear sentences? Have you written it down? Have you refined it? Have you shared it with others? Have you pressure tested it? These are the things I'm calling you to do because your life is important and you've been forged for a reason, right? So you got to remember, if it's just a vague feeling, if it's just something you believe in but haven't committed to, it's not going to work because what stays undefined rarely gets lived out. People live out things when they become very clear to them. It's very difficult to live out things that are unclear, right? And so we want to get you on the mission, right? We want to get you in a place where you're acting it out actually, that you can articulate it, that it's on your calendar. And hey, wouldn't it be cool to be a part of a group of people that were actually building theirs and helping you live it out? And that's, by the way, what we do. So let's talk about this, right? Let's talk about a mission. Let's talk about a mission statement, not that you just don't admire or an idea, but let's talk about a standard that you can live by. Because when that happens, that's when the clarity comes and the chaos starts to float away. That's when you gain direction. That's when your decision making is a lot clearer. You tend to have more energy because you're living by a North Star, by a compass heading, and you become resilient, right? Which we're going to talk about over the course of our podcast series. Because when you don't, you drift. You default to comfort and you become reactive instead of intentional. So, we're going to close that gap. So here's 3 ideas. I want to share 3 ideas. If you have a pen and paper, you want to write this down. These are 3 things that you can do to build your personal mission statement. This is going to be fun. I'm going to share the 3 points quickly, then I'm going to go back and iterate them or reiterate them or just unbox them a little bit for you. So the first one is, what is something that you're good at? Something that could potentially help others. The second point is, what are you willing to suffer for? And the third point is, how do you make it actionable and testable? Okay, the first one, what is something that you're good at? Something that actually could help others. In some circles, we call this a gift, okay? And I don't want you to overthink this, but this is the starting point. And you have to remember that big things come from small and humble beginnings. This is something that I'm urging you to take on. Formulate a mission for your life. It comes with a mission statement, which this is part of the journey, right? But this is taking inventory, and we're going to talk about the idea of asking others to help you craft this. But this is something that actually, believe it or not, you just do really well, and you do it naturally, right? You got to remember, some people build ideas, and others drive those ideas. Some people build ideas, others drive them, and others connect the right people to make the work cross the finish line. We call those connectors. Imagine that for a second. You can actually be a person. You don't need to graduate from Berkeley or Yale, but you can be in a room. If you have the ability to bring 2 people together in a conversation that's meaningful, you have the ability to change the lives of a lot of people. You're just a connector. When I say just a connector, meaning you play a very specific role, you're not the innovator, you're not the business builder, but you have a social ability that those other 2 people don't. It is equally as important as the owner or the chief operating officer of a company, because you play a critical role, right? Some people fix things. Some are great listeners. I'd like to believe I'm one. My wife might challenge you on that. But some people just make things happen, right? So it's up to you here to discover, what are you just naturally good at? And how can that be applied to helping others? That's really the tipping point in the conversation, is how does this gift potentially how could it help other people. And I want you to ask 3 people in your life, hey, what am I good at? Ask your parents, ask your colleagues, whatever, family, kids, friends. What do you think I'm just naturally good at? Now, you're going to get a lot of laughs out of this. People are going to say stupid things. That's okay. Keep going. Don't be deterred. Just keep going and find the answers to this first question because they're critical. Okay. The second one is, what are you willing to suffer for? Now you go, gosh, suffering. And I mentioned this above, right? That we're a culture that is now becoming less and less comfortable, and we all avoid pain. Of course, that's how the human brain is wired. But culturally, we're becoming softer. We're becoming more fragile. That's why resiliency and resilience training is so critical in this day and age. But I want you to think about you and what you would suffer for. And I know that sounds heroic. It sounds like William Wallace and Braveheart, which, by the way, if you've never seen Braveheart, you've got to watch that. I think one of the top 10 all-time greatest films, right? But you have to figure out what really moves you. You know, if you're the guy that sees an animal suffering or a gal, it breaks your heart. Or maybe you hate to see people, they come through the door, they're walking with a limp. There's something in life that doesn't sit well with you. And you've probably thought about it over and over. I want to make a difference in that area. And I was invited to Nepal a couple of years ago to do some leadership training to an organization that was taking the fight to sex trafficking young women out of Nepal and into India and into China. And having 2 daughters, this was an incredibly emotional experience for me, that I was just having a mountaintop moment, believing in that moment that I was a part of good overcoming evil. And being a father that's got daughters, this was so deeply personal to me. I loved standing in that place and knowing that in that group of 40 or 50 people, they're going to take 1 or 2 of my ideas that's going to save, if it's just 1 or 2 young girls, my life and my trip was worth it going to Nepal. Sometimes people will walk into a public place like a restaurant or a gym and they'll have a leg cast on, and I'll never hesitate to go up to them and just say, hey, how long is the healing how's the healing process going? But I'll interact with them because I understand that moment for those people. I understand that they're hurting, they feel limited, and they can't wait to get their lives back. But I go back to you, and the question is to you. What are you willing to suffer for? What makes you burn? What stirs your gut? If it doesn't move your gut, it won't move your schedule. It won't move your life. You got to get in touch with what really moves you, and you can't be afraid of that, right? There's a problem in the world that your gift is designed to solve. That's a true statement. There's something in you that needs to make a contribution. That's when you're going to be happy. That's what this podcast is about. The mission is you making a contribution to other people. And I'm going to tell you this again, whether you believe it or not. And if you're young, you don't, but you will one day. A ton of money is not a mission, and it's not going to make you happy. Now, I know you're going to hear that over and over, and you probably already heard it again. Here's what I'm not saying. A ton of money can open up a ton of doors and provide a lot of opportunities in a lot of different ways. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. What I'm saying is it does not fill up a unique part of you that needs to experience the act and the art of giving yourself away for a good cause. It can't take the place. All right? So we tracking? I think we're tracking. The third thing is, how do you make this idea actionable and testable, right? And so, you know that you're really serious about something when it's on your schedule and you're dedicating time to learning and training and growing in it, right? And so, that's what we want to do. I want to encourage you to do is to now block out some time on your schedule each week where you're going to talk about and work on your mission. And you can use your AI sources. You can reach out to people that you're impressed with, that you trust, that motivate you. But just got to remember, if it's not showing up in your habits and on your schedule, and if it's not your standard, it's not a mission yet. It's just an idea. And we want to turn that idea into a mission so that you can mark that time and say, this is the time where I actually turned the corner and I took action on this great idea. And so there you have it. This is a blueprint, right? This is intentional. And at a call to rise, that's what we believe. We believe you can't rise by accident. People rise to their call by intention. You rise by design, right? And that's your mission, right? And and your mission is the same way, meaning this is the blueprint, right? So take the time, ask the hard questions,
write it down, refine it, and then start to live it in an imperfect way. You get to try things on, like when you go try clothing on and stuff like that, or if you're going to go, someone's getting married and you have to try to rent a tux or something. You try it on. And if it feels right, you rent it, right? But this is the same idea. Now, I know this is a big deal, and I'm not being flippant, but what I'm saying is when you have a good idea, put it into action. Put it into action. Talk about it, get input on it, refine it, but then put it into action. Because, once you know your why, you become a very difficult man to stop. And that's because you become a man on a mission. And that's what the world needs from you. They need you to make a contribution, and the world's waiting for you to make your contribution.
If today's conversation challenged you, it's a real signal you need to do the work. It's no longer an option for you. So don't push that feeling away. It's reminding you of the cost of playing small. Success is easy when things go well, but resilience, that's cultivated when things go sideways. Make sure you subscribe, and if this episode brought you value, pass it on. It's how we grow the tribe. We'll be back hopefully next week. Until then, I'll see you next time. Here is your call to rise. Rise up so that others can rise.